They called it the Invincible Fortress, but it ended its life buried in the ground like an ordinary pillbox. Why did the most expensive tank of the USSR, worth 10 Lamborghinis, become the biggest disappointment of the army? Imagine night at the proving ground in 1945. The earth trembles from the roar. Out of the darkness bursts a steel monster weighing 60 tons, the IS-4. Its 122mm D-25T gun bellows like an enraged beast, firing shell after shell every 20 seconds. The 250mm armor on the turret front calmly swallows direct hits from German 128mm armor-piercing rounds that tore Tigers to shreds. The driver presses himself into the seat. The V12 engine with 750 horsepower roars, accelerating this mountain of steel to 43 kilometers per hour. This is not just a tank. This is the absolute weapon of victory, the most protected creation of Soviet engineering. But here's the paradox that gives you chills. This 10-meter giant, capable of withstanding the fire of an entire battery, never fired a single combat shot in a real war. Why? Why, instead of throwing it into battle, did they simply bury it up to the turret in frozen soil on the border with China and turn it into stationary firing points? Today we uncover the secret of the forgotten Titan IS-4. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's dive into this drama. 1943. The Battle of Kursk has just ended. The Germans threw Tigers and Panthers into the fight, steel monsters with armor that our IS-2s and KVs struggled to penetrate. The Red Army needed an answer, a tank that wouldn't just survive, but would become the king of the battlefield. Chief designer Nikolai Dukov at the Chelyabinsk-Kirov plant receives the task. Create a machine that surpasses everything the Germans and the Allies have. Old heavy tanks suddenly became useless. The Tiger with its 88mm gun no longer scared anyone, because the Americans and British were preparing new attack aircraft and heavy guns. They needed something that could take a 128mm shell to the front and smash any enemy 5 kilometers away. That's how the Object 701 project was born, the future IS-4. It was the challenge of the era, the most protected tank in USSR history against the approaching Cold War. It all started in the garages of Chakay-Z, where the designer brothers under Dukov and later Balzi literally lived in the workshops. 6 experimental Object 701 prototypes were built in just a few months of 1944. One with a 100mm gun, the others with 122mm. Trials at Kubinka turned into real drama. The transmission failed already at the 100th kilometer, the engine overheated, the armor cracked under fire from captured German guns. One tank covered 1,000 kilometers, but they had to replace the entire gearbox twice. Bureaucracy nearly buried the project. After the IS-3 was accepted in 1945, work was halted. Why another heavyweight? But in 1946, it became clear that the IS-3 was also raw. Dukov and the team fought the generals. This tank is the future of the army. On April 29, 1946, by a decree of the Council of Ministers, the IS-4 was adopted. But production was pure hell. Due to post-war devastation and a shortage of skilled workers, military acceptance rejected 50 to 60% of the vehicles right away. In total, from 1947 to 1949, only 224 production IS-4s and 25 upgraded IS-4Ms were built. It was an unlucky giant that the system almost strangled in the cradle. Now the main moment, what hides under this armor? Main armament. The 122mm rifled D-25T gun. The same one as on the IS-2 and IS-3, but paired with the new turret, it became a killer. A 40-kilogram shell flew 5 kilometers and penetrated 200mm of steel at 1 kilometer. Rate of fire, 2 to 3 rounds per minute, but each shot is like a hammer blow. Ammo, 30 shells, 2 heavy DSK machine guns with 1,000 rounds each for infantry and aircraft. Protection and innovations. That's where the IS-4 became legendary. Hull frontal armor, 140 to 160 millimeters, at 61 degrees. The turret, cast, front 250 mm, sides 200. More than any tank of its time. A German 128 mm shell ricocheted like a pea off a wall. The secret sauce, sloped plates and cast construction that absorbed impact energy. The four-man crew felt like they were inside an unbreakable fortress. Suspension and acrobatics. 7 pairs of road wheels on torsion bar suspension, tracks 720 mm wide. Ground pressure, only 92 kilograms per square centimeter. The tank forded 1.5 meters of water, climbed 90-centimeter walls, and crossed 2-meter 80 trenches. But here's the paradox. 750 horsepower accelerated 60 tons to only 43 kilometers per hour on the highway. Reverse gear was weak, planetary transmission with 6 forward and 3 reverse speeds. It simply broke the bridges of that era under its own weight. It was a steel monster that hindered its own movement. Combat debut? There wasn't one. The IS-4 arrived too late for the Great Patriotic War. It ended in May 1945. It wasn't sent to Korea or other conflicts, too heavy, too unreliable. The transmission broke everyone to 200 kilometers. The engine sucked dust and snow straight into the driver's face. In 1948 to 1949 exercises, half the vehicles failed within a week. But this unlucky Titan got a second life. In the late 1960s, when tensions with China escalated, most IS-4s were buried up to the turret along the border in Transbaikalia and Primary. 250 millimeters of armor turned them into ideal stationary pillboxes, firing points that could hold the line for decades. The ghost of Stalin stood in frozen ground, guarding the borders, even though it never fired a shot in real combat. It was a tragedy. The Queen of Artillery became just a monument to its own power. Let's put the IS-4 face to face with its enemies. Against the German Tiger II, total victory, turret 250 versus 180, weight 60 tons versus 70. But our armor stops the 128mm shell, while the German one doesn't. American M26 Pershing or early pattern, the IS-4 weighed 1.5 times more, armor twice as thick. Absolute superiority in protection. Compared to Soviet tanks, the IS-3 weighed only 46 tons, lighter, faster, but weaker armor. The T-10 was already better, but the IS-4 remained the most protected Soviet heavyweight. The price of one IS-4, almost 1 million rubles, like 10 modern Lamborghinis. For that money, you got a tank that could survive the apocalypse, but he couldn't reach the battlefield without breaking down. Bottom line, the IS-4 left behind a legacy of paradox. It proved you can create an unbreakable fortress, but forgot that war is not only armor, but also mobility and reliability. This forgotten titan became a symbol. Sometimes the strongest project ends its life in the ground as a monument. And now a question for you, friends. Is a tank worth that kind of money and weight if it never fights? Or will robots and drones soon completely replace tank crews? Write your verdict in the comments, most protected or most unlucky. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe and hit the bell. Next episode, about another forgotten masterpiece. See you on the battlefield of history. Your host signing off. Bye.